Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Ninja Show. In this show, we will walk you through the rich Ninja block content from fundamentals to experts as the show continues. My name is Heike Ritter. I will be your host for the show. And in every episode, I will be joined by an expert who will guide us through the powerful features and functions of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. This is the first episode. It's an overview. I remember the last Microsoft Defender for Endpoint overview that I did was back in April 2020. It was just 1 week after I got my puppy Whiskey, and that presentation turned into the Whiskey Show because I had to interrupt him constantly from chewing all kinds of things. Some of you might even remember. I'm pretty sure that either Whiskey or Sky, one of my two dogs, will join us throughout the show because, working from home, there's always some noise. Today I'm joined by my colleague John Nix, and I don't think he has dogs, but maybe kids running around. John, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Heike. Yeah, I'm John Nix. I'm a senior program manager for our customer experience engineering team, and you're exactly right. So we'll see if we can have kids and dogs on the screen at the same time today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today. So before we actually dive into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, John, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is a key component of Microsoft 365 Defender. What does it mean?
Yeah, Heike. So really what that means is that Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is a major part of our XDR solution, which is Extended Detection and Response platform. And that really helps us protect, detect, and respond against threats across different endpoints, applications, email, even IoT, using our products like Defender for Office, Defender for Identity, and even Cloud App Protection.
Now let's actually go and look at Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So it's a huge platform. It has a lot of capabilities and functions. So today we want to have a look across and see and touch a little bit on each of them. And then, of course, we will have deeper dive sessions to go and drill down into the individual features and functions. John, if you think about Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, how would you explain it in a few sentences to someone who has no clue what it is?
Well, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is really an endpoint protection platform that consists of a lot of different features that encompass that entire protect, detect, and respond strategy that we talked about earlier. So from endpoint protection all the way through to the endpoint detection and response, there's a lot of different features that you can configure to help protect against specific attacks and also be able to have post-breach visibility so that you can understand what happened during attack and even have response capabilities to help you isolate and respond to specific attacks in real time.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good explanation. So when we think about, many people probably saw this, we call it spider diagram. I think it should be pillar diagram. So when I started building this many years ago, my intent was to go from the left to the right, explaining basically those are all the things that you do in order to protect, to harden, and then you leave the post-breach, the pre-breach, and then you go into the post-breach kind of thing. So the first pillar, I don't even know if it's a pillar, but the first topic I think we want to talk about is asset discovery, which brings us to a lot of things. First of all, what are these assets? What can we do when we found them? John.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of devices that are running inside of a traditional network, right? In addition to, what type of endpoints that you're running, whether they're Windows endpoints or another, type of endpoint, there are things like printers, there are network devices, there's lots of different things that are running in a particular environment. So asset discovery is really about, finding what kind of assets are out there and getting some information about those assets. And if, in some cases, if there are vulnerabilities on specific assets, surfacing that information information to you through there.
Vulnerability management is something we will talk about next, but you said something in your earlier sentence which was about Windows and other devices on the network. I just want to really be crystal clear that Defender for Endpoint is not just for Windows and other network devices. So John, what are the current supported platforms, multiple?
No, that's right. That's right. So there are several platforms that we support. Windows Endpoint for sure, Windows Server as well. We also support Linux Server, so there's various distributions and even distribution versions that we support. Mac OS, and even on the mobile threat defense side, so we've got iOS and Android support as well.
What I love about asset discovery is also not just to find these network devices, but also to find unmanaged devices. So you basically other client endpoints such as Windows endpoints and others that are not yet onboarded to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Could you walk us through that flow? How would that show up in the portal? I don't know if you have a demo. If not, we can talk about it. But what would be the steps a security analyst, a security admin would see and do in order to get those devices protected?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do detect unmanaged devices that can be managed. So I've just pulled up Microsoft 365 Defender portal here, and to illustrate what that actually looks like, you can just go here under Endpoints to Device Inventory. And then once you're in the device inventory page, you can see all of the different devices that have been onboarded. And this particular demo environment doesn't have any that are discovered for onboarding, but you'll see that right here in this column where it says onboarded status. You can even go.
John, I would not say they're not discovered. I would say that admin of the demo tenant already onboarded them to be managed.
There you go. Yep. So we're fully onboarded in this environment. So you can go to the filter here and you can actually scroll down a little bit and you can actually even select the onboarding status that you want to see. So you can actually see the can be onboarded and apply. And again, in this environment, they're all onboarded. So we're good to go.
Good to go. So if they would not have been onboarded yet, what would be the next step?
Well, so the next step is onboarding. And onboarding can be done a variety of different ways, really depending on how you're managing your devices today. So you can do that through a group policy, you can do that through Configuration Manager, you can do that through the Microsoft Endpoint Manager, through Intune. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about doing that onboarding, but we'll actually get into more details of management in just a bit.
Let's talk about threat and vulnerability management. So what is this about and how can people think about it?
Yeah, so threat and vulnerability management is a really awesome feature in Defender for Endpoint, and that really gives you continuous real-time discovery. It also provides a lot of context for prioritization, and it's really trying to encompass all of the devices that you've got onboarded with Defender for Endpoint. So Windows, Linux, Mac OS, iOS, Android, all of those are covered today by threat and vulnerability management.
So I think one of the big differentiators when it comes to traditional vulnerability assessment solutions is that ours is part of the EDR sensor. So it's not a scanner that runs and then every other day you have maybe an inventory or something, right? So it's basically, as you said, continuous scanning. And we even know, I love that, if your line of business application is vulnerable. And we have no clue about that, but it's maybe loading some censored plugin, and we know that that censored plugin is vulnerable. We can tell that this line of business application is actually vulnerable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it does give you a lot of visibility into not only what's running, but what those components are using and what the vulnerabilities might be associated with those components.
So can you explain us a little bit how that prioritization works? What is it? Because we call it business prioritization, like depending on, you will explain, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So prioritization really depends on the context of your environment, what the current state of your, endpoint devices are, what the state of the applications are, and really what the state of the vulnerabilities are for those applications. So really when we talk about, kind of context aware, prioritization, it really is taking all of those factors and assigning a score to these remediation tasks that's based on all of those contexts. Is your Windows device, very, very, very far out of date? Is a third-party application running that is very much out of date that you're not necessarily aware of, that maybe didn't get caught with the update cycles that you're running, things like that? Is there a very severe vulnerability for a particular device in a very sensitive location? All of these things are kind of taken into account with the threat and vulnerability management to give you prioritization over what is the thing that you should do first, second, third, fourth. So it takes a lot of that information together to give you those recommendations, which is very unique with threat and vulnerability management.
Yeah, as well as is that application, even if it's installed and there is a vulnerability, is someone using it, or is it not even being used on the endpoint, or do we see an actual I don't know, activity group leveraging this vulnerability and is really going after it, like, yeah, the threat landscape, as you said, and these kind of things. So, would you mind pulling up your portal again and show us how quickly, let's say, the dashboard overview and how a remediation, not the remediation works, but what that view is about all the things that should be fixed?
Yeah, sure. So when we pull up the portal here, we go down to vulnerability management, and we can start first with the dashboard. So the dashboard's going to show a lot of things that are really interesting right off the bat. The exposure score is something that's actually really helps you understand what does the entire organization look like with this particular score, right? What are the vulnerabilities that are impacting particular devices? What are the different severities of those vulnerabilities? What is your patch level? All of these different things on all of your devices. So what you can do here is monitor your score over periods of time. You can start to see peaks and valleys as patches are released or third-party vulnerabilities are discovered, and you can see in real time as you start to remediate those vulnerabilities, as you start to secure your configuration, that score will go lower and lower and lower. So it's a way that you can track the cyclical process of the vulnerability management process overall.
And then I think the other part that I wanted to have a look at was that I think it's called remediation. I
Yeah,
can't read so
absolutely.
tiny.
Well, let's first take a look at recommendations here, right? So the recommendations is what I was talking about before, where we're taking a look at all of the different recommendations and what the actual impact score is for the recommendations in your environment. So again, this takes all of the context of what's running in your environment and scores it in a way that puts these, high priority remediations on top. In addition, it actually gives you threat insights. If you are being attacked with a particular vulnerability, it will show up here and it will say, hey, we've got an alert that's associated with this application or this particular vulnerability. And then this right here is going to be some insights on the actual threats to give you some information on, is this threat actively being exploited in the wild? Are there any sort of POCs that are available for this particular exploit available for attackers to use? So again, it provides a lot of different context into what the actual recommended remediation should be.
Wow. So, and then you can basically request a remediation. And if you have endpoint management integration, you could create a security ticket with all the context. What are the devices? What needs to be done? And then when you go back, you can see under remediation the the task that you basically just created, and see in lifetime, in real time again, because again, we are on the endpoint. If things are being updated, we can see it in the portal itself. We don't need to go back to IT and ask, hey, did you update? Because we will see it in the portal, right?
Yeah, so what you would want to do is just open up the application, and then you can request the remediation right here. And then after the remediation ticket is sent, like you said, over to IT, you can then track the progress of that remediation item here. So here are some remediations that have already been sent and that are in progress, and exactly what you said is exactly true. Anyone can monitor these in real time. So you can see, out of this one, we fixed 462 out of 1,570 different devices here. And then, this one here, we've remediated 10 out of 13. So again, all of these are tracked in real time without the requirement to rescan and collect that data again in order to track that remediation.
Thank you. So that was threat and vulnerability management in a nutshell. So we will have a deep dive on that, of course, coming up. We moved to attack surface reduction. This is a big pillar because it has a lot in there. So we will not be able to go through all of this today, of course. This is an overview. But John, what is, again, your elevator pitch of attack surface reduction, as well as maybe a couple of examples and the feature that you love the most? So there you go.
Yeah, so under attack surface reduction, that's a really big umbrella of products that is really focused on eliminating risks by reducing that attack surface. And underneath that, there's different features like application control, exploit protection, network protection, control folder access, device control. I could go on and on and on, right? There's a lot of stuff in there. You asked me what my favorite is, and I'll tell you what really gives customers the bang for the buck when it comes to attack surface reduction is our attack surface reduction rules. I'd love to show you some demos of this, but quite honestly, there's a lot of different rules. There's a lot of different rules that apply to different environments, but this is really focused on the type of rules that can block attackers from using common entry points in all of the different environments. Each one of these rules are individually configurable to devices that may have these applications, may not have these applications, may be running applications that may use some of these activities that attackers may also use. So you can really start fine-tuning what is capable and not capable with these different rules across different endpoints. And really what we're talking about are rules like blocking Office applications from creating executable content, blocking Office applications from injecting code into other processes, even email rules like blocking executable content from email clients and webmail. So some of these rules will be relevant to some of your devices, all of your devices. Some of them maybe need to get disabled or put in audit mode for other devices that may be using these activities. Either way, these rules significantly reduce the attack surface that are commonly used by attackers, and also give you the ability to audit these in environments where you may not be able to turn on the full blocking functionality.
So I was just saying, you said something which like audit, as it was something the most normal thing. So you can basically put these rules in audit mode and use the security center, the portal, to get insights. Or why would I do this in audit mode, and what do I get in return?
Well, so a lot of times you don't know what an accountant is doing, for example. So you've got an accountant that's been around a really long time, and they're using Excel and they're using Word and they're using all these productivity apps, but they created macros 10 years ago. And they're using those as part of your payroll process, and blocking that application, let's say from, running, injecting code into another process, that's going to cause issues with your payroll. And you don't want to be the guy that causes issues with payroll. So you turn these rules onto audit mode, and you go into advanced hunting, and you're looking at, what are the devices, what are the applications that are triggering these rules in your environment, and you see, oh, this accountant is running payroll and they're being clearly, running up against this rule. So then you can tailor the the attack surface reduction rules. You can tailor those down to add the particular application as an exclusion, or you can say, I'm not going to enforce that particular rule on this specific workstation, but you still get the visibility if anything happens. Hey, an attacker used that method to get a foothold, and you're investigating it as part of the post breach, and you're able to see, oh, yep, they came in and they used that method against this particular device.
So you already using the expert level, let's use advanced hunting. I know that there is actually in the portal also a page that shows you the rules in audit mode, and you would see if that rule would block what application. So you don't have to be that expert right now to discover. Actually, these macro rules were always my favorite, because everybody has macros, everybody hates macros, others love macros. It's a thing, right? And then rather than macros on and off, you can now really give them more granular execution or not.
And one of the things I really like about this too is that it extends beyond Office applications and Office rules here, right? So we can see some script-related rules, and then even looking at polymorphic threats. So if you've got some very high secure environments, or you just know, hey, our users aren't going to be using any files that don't have prevalence, right? Or don't have that aren't brand new, right? And you want to turn that on to block all of those in your environment, or even just certain devices, you can certainly do that. Even exploiting vulnerable signed drivers is one of the rules that you can turn on here, and blocking process creations from PSExec, and also credential stealing from the Windows Local Security subsystem, right? The LSAS subsystem. That's very, very common. So all of these rules provide very in-depth protections against these capabilities in the environment. They're very, very valuable for customers to consider and to start deploying in their environment.
So, anything else around attack surface reduction you would like to discuss, share, or should we move on?
Yeah, one thing, if you're not using attack surface reduction rules in your environment today, there's nothing stopping you from going in and configuring them to audit mode and at least start evaluating these rules in your own environment. At the very least, it gives you more visibility than what you had before. So I think it's highly valuable for all customers.
Next, we are still in our pre-breach. We are moving on to next generation protection, which is the Microsoft Defender antivirus, part of Defender for Endpoint, an antivirus solution. And I think we want to have as well a deeper look, but not too deep, because we also will have a deep dive and we can't spend the entire time for one pillar. But John, if you could give us a good overview of what's all in there and what it does and why it's awesome.
Sure. Well, when you talk about fundamentals, you cannot get more fundamental than what we have with next generation protection, to be honest with you. We're really talking about looking at, sophisticated threats, malware, by a process that includes, behavioral-based real-time monitoring, even blocking fileless and file-based malware. All of these different things are being analyzed by, next-generation protection to stop malicious activity from, both untrusted applications and even trusted applications, if trusted applications are being used as an attack point in your environment. So the next generation protection really does a fantastic job at doing that by, joining what's happening on the endpoint with cloud-based capabilities as well.
So I was saying, that funnel where we talk about all that commodity malware and then going, you take it, John.
What makes Defender for Endpoint Next Generation Protection so awesome is it combines a lot of the client-based features such as machine learning, behavior monitoring, AMC integration, even emulation on the endpoint itself with a lot of the machine learning capabilities in the cloud. So really what we're doing is focusing on the protection stack as a whole. That includes a lot of the features that you're going to use in the endpoint to protect against a lot of that commodity malware that you'll find out in the wild, that's we're aware of, that we've got signatures for. And then you start getting into more of the novel malware, right? Something that may not be well known, something that may be tailored for your specific environment. And that's where you really start leveraging all of those next generation protections by looking at the metadata through the cloud, by submitting suspicious samples for analysis, by actually doing detonation, and then at the very end here, classifying threats amongst all of the different signals as part of a big data process that Microsoft has. So you're really able to protect against a ton of different threats that both exist in that commodity space all the way through to that tailor space just for you and your organization.
And just to clarify again, you were saying on the endpoint, right? So yes, there is our behavioral monitoring, there is AI on the client, there is signatures on the client, there is an emulator, there is all these kind of things on the client that help you with the majority of the malware. But when it comes to a little bit going down the pipeline, a little bit more sophisticated, targeted on these kind of things, we are using the combination of our cloud. Is that how I understood that?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So all of those features are a big benefit when you add cloud protection into the next generation protection capabilities.
We are moving to PostBridge. So now it's basically something happened on your network, your prevention might not have protected you enough, or misconfiguration, whatever it is. And now we are looking into an endpoint detection and response. So of course there is, again, a lot of technology in order to correlate events and make these useful alerts and notifications. But also, I would love to focus a little bit maybe on the richness of the data that we see, the investigation experience, maybe show a little bit of, you mentioned it at the very beginning, you can respond to these kind of things. So I would love to call you up again to show maybe the portal, take one of the nice incidents that you want to show us and walk us through a machine timeline and how you would quickly respond without going into too deep.
Yeah, absolutely. So really a lot of the benefits of the Microsoft 365 Defender platform here is in the incidents. And the incidents are really a collection of alerts that are happening. And so if you take a look at this, demo incident we have here in this environment, you can immediately see that the incident severity is high. That typically means some sort of an advanced persistent attack. You can see that the automated investigation and response platform has done some initial investigation here that's affecting a couple of hosts. It's affecting 4 different accounts, the number of alerts, even all the way through to the detection sources. So you can see sources here like Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, and even Defender for Office is all part of this. And again, this kind of goes back to what we're talking about in XDR and combining those signals. So once we kind of hit the drop down here, we can actually start diving into, what are the actual alerts as part of this incident. And you can see, yeah, this one's a pretty serious one.
So what would you do? So if you have a serious thingy, you go, and what would you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So diving into the alert, you get to see, what the different MITRE attack categories here that were being used as part of this attack, and you immediately get to see how many impacted users, mailboxes, impacted applications, all of this different information here. This kind of tells the story of what happened. Suspicious URL got clicked. You can see the alerts associated with that. You can see the user account discovery all the way through, lateral movement, all of these different things, right? So if I wanted to take action on a specific device, I can see we've got 2 devices that are affected here. You can actually even click on this particular device. You can see what users logged into this application. You can see all the device details. And some of the most important features that you'll see here are the response capabilities. So when you click on the ellipsis by the device icon, you can do things like initiating a live response session. If I want to log onto this machine remotely and I want to perform a deeper investigation, I can do that. The best part too here is you can isolate the device. So by isolating the device, you are limiting all network communication with that particular device except to the Defender platform. So if you want to isolate a device and continue your investigation through live response or through other portal actions, you can absolutely do that while that device is still online and protect it against other networks, other network devices that may be on the same network or even exfiltration on the internet.
So one thing I actually wanted to go into, could you go into the machine itself? Because I think a very important topic here is if you go to the timeline, so depending on how you set up the tenant, you can choose to keep your data for up to 180 days. And of course, it's not just the EDR data that's shown here. It is everything that we basically pick up from the endpoint for what we talked about, right? It's attack surface reduction, it's AV, it's all the events that we use in order to identify, or like if we need for security reasons, that we bring up in the timeline.
Yeah, so the timeline's got everything, and you can even filter the timeline here, by particular event group. Say that I just want to see firewall events, network events, process events, things like that. But then one of the coolest features about this is this little slider right here. So right here, you can actually kind of move based on the timeline that you particularly want here. But each one of the alerts are actually something that's clickable here in the timeline. So if I want to just go straight to the activity around this alert, I can click on the alert itself and it'll bring up what this specific alert is and the action that triggered that particular alert. So now I'm immediately in the right timeline and the right space on this device, and I can start seeing what's actually happening on this particular device around the time of this alert.
I will deep dive that with my experts again, because I think there is a lot in alerts and incidents, and we don't have the time to go through that.
You definitely should check out the Go Hunt button for sure whenever you do that. Yeah. So
EDR, again, it's so much, right? It's the investigation experience, of course, all the detection. It's the option to include your own indicators of compromise. It's response actions. It's, as you said, advanced hunting is part of it. There is a lot. So we will deep dive into this a little further, but not in this show because we need to move on. So automation, John, this is all about helping security analysts to quicker resolve incidents, of course, by investigating and doing all the work that an analyst would do, just automate it, and then helping them have the time to focus on the more sophisticated things happening on the network. So automation, do you want to explain a little bit how this is being triggered? Like what is causing an investigation? What is an investigation? And what are possible response thingies that Defender for Endpoint does for you?
Sure. So when you enable automated investigation, you're really giving Defender for Endpoint the capability to go in after an alert. So an alert's going to trigger an investigation. And as part of that investigation, it's going to look at a lot of different activities around the alert that was generated. So, what files were written, what registry changes were made, over the recent period of time and even after the alert happened, what, files were being run, all of these different things are going to be analyzed by the automated investigation and response to try to figure out, okay, so we detected something. Is there something else that we need to be aware of? Is there something else that happened as part of this alert that we may need to remediate? So then automation can be configured to either surface recommendations to the security operations team and say, hey, we found this during the investigation. We would like your approval to go ahead and quarantine it or roll back these particular actions. or it can be set to automatically respond when it finds malicious artifacts. So that's really trying to mimic the ideal steps that someone would take when they're responding and investigating a particular cyber threat.
Which is basically the settings that we would recommend to do fully automated for, of course, the majority of the machines. Probably there is a few machines that you would put in exception mode. So we don't want anyone to wait 2, 3, 6, 17 hours for someone to approve a remediation of a threat that's going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this really is all about saving time, and minutes matter whenever it comes to incident response. So, automated investigation recovery can mean, the difference between having a heavily impacted environment versus, just a middle of the night wake up call for a security analyst, right? So this is something that I think is very important for customers to look at. There's also very rich logging when it comes to the automated investigation and response, the AutoIR piece. So you really get to see exactly what AutoIR is doing, exactly what it found, and exactly what it did. So it gives you a little sense of comfort that it's not just operating in, its own black hole.
That's good to know. I always like to bring up that example. Like, just imagine you have a high severity alert on your endpoint. You use conditional access, which means that user in this moment is not allowed to access corporate data at that time anymore because you configured conditional access. So now there's no waiting, calling something, and a security team needs to do something, because our automation will kick in. Our automation will resolve that alert and will close the alert. The severity is gone and the user can access again, right? So this is a beautiful full scenario of how this could look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that really highlights some of the benefits of having a zero trust approach with conditional access integrated with, Defender for Endpoint.
Okay, let's move on. We already have a lot of time spent, but there's more. The last pillar for now is Microsoft Threat Experts. I would love to also keep it short. There's, John, two things that come with Microsoft Threat Experts. What are these?
Yeah, so Microsoft Threat Experts really comes with two major benefits. The first is getting targeted attack notifications. This is where our threat experts are going to proactively hunt to look for different anomalies and no malicious behavior in your unique environment. And what that's going to do is it's going to pop up alerts that are tagged with the Microsoft Threat Experts, and it's going to say, hey, we see this particular threat actor, we see this particular threat actor activity inside of your environment. It'll come with the researcher analysis on what that activity entails, what it looks like, sometimes advanced hunting queries to try to help find, more of that activity in your environment. But it's really us watching for, different targeted attacks in specific customer environments. And then
And
this,
all the data that we are looking at is de-anonymized. So it's not that we have visibility into customers' networks or like the data or nothing. They only see weird numbers, right?
correct. Yeah, it is anonymized so that, we're only looking for, specific attack patterns related to these types of attacks in that environment.
Cool. And the second piece?
Yeah, the second piece is experts on demand, and really what that does is gives you a direct line back to our threat experts to say, hey, I've got a question about this alert. I've got a question about this specific malware that we found. I've got a question about, this incident, the, kill chain that we're seeing here, anything like that, involving a particular threat. You'll be able to go in and, share the alert information, share the threat details with a threat expert and say, hey, can you help me understand this? Can I ask some questions about that? And really get some deep insights from, directly from our threat experts into whatever it is that you have a question about.
Yeah, and just, I mean, we're not going into licensing here, but just to make sure, the first part, targeted attack notification, is part of your E5 license, so you can apply for it. And then Experts on Demand is a separate license on top where you get X amount of reach out to our experts. Yeah. One thing that we talked about in this context, John, was actually threat analytics. Threat analytics, it's such a valuable feature for one of the, next to advanced hunting, I think many people really, really love threat experts because it gives Ihnen a threat to posture view of their environment. And I think you wanted to talk a little bit about who is writing these.
Yeah, absolutely. So threat analytics is an absolutely fantastic feature inside of Defender for Endpoint. So you can go here and you can see, not only what the latest threats are, but what the highest impact threats are in your environment and what the highest exposure you have to particular threats based on your configuration of Defender for Endpoint. So the awesome thing is all of these have different reports that are written by analysts. So you kind of get an overview, you get an idea of what type of alerts that you've had, devices that are affected in your organization by this particular threat, but then you can do a deep dive into the report. So again, this is the Microsoft threat analysts that are going through and writing these particular reports that are coming up with the analysis. They're giving you very detailed technical information about the specific characteristics of this attack, and you can even go down here, take a look at the kill chain all the way through based on this attack, and then even through to different mitigations. So what do I need to turn on in order to protect myself against this specific attack? What does it look like? What do the different detections look like from an antivirus standpoint, EDR detection standpoint, all the way through to advanced hunting? You want to see if any of these characteristics have been found in your environment over the last 30 days. You can use these advanced hunting queries and immediately find out, more information about this particular attack in your environment.
And these people are all part of the Microsoft threat experts.
Yes.
Yes, that's to close the loop where I came from. Good. So the last part I really want to touch on, and I know there is way more, but it's about quickly, of course, I will cover this quickly. APIs and partners. We have rich APIs. People can integrate their own security solution or integrate Defender for Endpoint into their own security solution systems that they might have. There is a rich ecosystem, of course. So if you go to the endpoint partner applications or something in the portal, you can see all the different technologies or partner applications that you can just with a click enable. So of course integration with ArcSight and Splunk, but there's also attack simulator and other third-party or ecosystem partner applications. So, and then what I would love for you, John, to cover also briefly, the last pillar that goes across everything is basically configuration / management of, doing all of these settings and configurations. And don't forget to talk about what we just announced.
Yeah, so that's actually super exciting, Heike. So you're right. We have a lot of different capabilities to manage devices, and it's really all about flexibility. You can use, group policy. You can you can use the Microsoft Endpoint Manager, Configuration Manager. You can use Intune. There's lots of different capabilities that you can use to manage your endpoints. But we do have a new feature that's called Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Security Configuration Management. And really what that does is it allows any device that's been onboarded by Defender for Endpoint to have its Defender security settings managed by the Microsoft Endpoint Manager without the use of Intune, without the use of group policy, without the use of configuration manager. So it really gives you a lot more flexibility to hit all of your devices regardless of where they are, how they're managed. Anything in that category can be managed. Anything that's been onboarded to Defender for Endpoint can be managed by the Microsoft Endpoint Management platform now with the new security configuration management component.
People can probably read on a blog more. We will put that in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we try to have a helicopter view of everything, but we should have just gone through a little faster. So, John, first of all, thank you so much. I hope you didn't have anything still left that you really wanted to share desperately right now, and then later like, I wanted to say this. Otherwise, you will come back to the show. For now, thank you so much, John, for being my experts on the very, very first episode of the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Ninja show. We will continue with the show, of course. Again, this was the first episode. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Even the show is over now. It's not over that you can reach out to us. There is a share your voice button on aka.ms/ninja show. And this comes directly to me, so it means you can share some concerns, you can share some feedback, you can share recommendations, anything that is related to the Ninja Show, of course. Please use that function and share your voice with me, and then of course I will reshare it with the team. The next episode is up. Go sign up for it if you haven't yet, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much.